All right, so welcome back, everybody, to the Clearview Finance Podcast. So for most of your adult life, your financial system is relatively straightforward. You work, your employer sends you a paycheck, and that paycheck covers your expenses. But then retirement arrives, and that paycheck stops. You may have a 401k, an IRA, Social Security, a pension, savings, or several different investment accounts. But having money and knowing how to turn it into a reliable retirement paycheck are two very different things. Today, we're going to walk through a hypothetical case involving a couple, and we'll just call them Dave and Linda. And they appear to be in reasonably good financial shape, but they're facing a dilemma that many retirees encounter. Where exactly is their retirement paycheck going to come from? All right, so before we get into their numbers, I just want to ask, why is this transition so difficult for people who may have been responsible savers their entire lives?
I think mostly it's a lot of psychological differences too, right? So think about you being reliant on something that you know. Okay, so now imagine the simple fact of you all of a sudden, and I guess let me make sure the question, why is it so difficult when they're looking at their pot of money and saying, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah, basically.
All right, so so think about for a second, you come to the grips that this is it. So imagine you're an accumulator. So all you've done is spent the entire time of your pretty much working life watching your account hopefully grow, and you're definitely watching it get bigger, right? With your contributions and then maybe some good investment returns. And then you come to the reality of, that's it. This is it. So what I have right now, what I have saved right now, what I have done, this is it. This now, when I look at this has to last me through the rest of my life, and it's got to tell me that I'm going to be okay, and that as things come up, as I still want to continue the lifestyle I'm accustomed to, the things that I want to do, this is supposed to give me every answer now, right? And so it becomes really psychological because they're like, okay, now what? So now I look at this, and let's just use $1 million balance just to be, argumentative. What's the $1 million mean? Like, I ask that question to everybody, and people would be just, they look at you kind of almost blank face. What do you mean? Well, you're now responsible for that $1 million, recreating, as we say, paychecks, recreating to be there to say, okay, this is now has to last of a lifetime. But most importantly, when they look at it, they don't know how the money is supposed to come out, right? So when you're used to accumulating and not taking out, and you're used to a steady paycheck, all that stops.
Yeah.
But right, which is why almost everybody rushes to the Social Security immediately, right? Because they're like, okay, I need something that I know, right?
Yeah.
So think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that reasoning. Yes, that's something I know, because now I don't know what to do. And I think that's what becomes the big problem.
So would you say it's kind of like that analogy where it's like, okay, you're just putting your head down and you're just going to work, following the same habits, the same stuff over and over again. And then it's just like,
stop, switches off.
What am I doing now?
Switches
wait
off.
a minute. It changes. It's they get used to a certain way of doing things.
They do.
Right. So it's a whole, I think that's what people always forget. It's a whole, not just a lifestyle switch. It's a whole reframe. It's a whole mental.
It's a
mindset switch that, you got to kind of, I don't want to say teach yourself, but kind of teach yourself how to walk a little bit again.
Of course.
So
it becomes
new thing to navigate, right?
So always remember that, money and psychology go together.
Yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah, big time. So, and I think that's going to be a lot of what factors into kind of, what we're going to be be talking about today. So I'll just kind of transition again to kind of what we were talking about with David and Linda.
David and Linda, that's
David
original.
and Linda, right?
Original name.
Yeah. Extremely, yes. All right, so let's meet Dave and Linda and look at why their situation is maybe more complicated than just simply, dividing their savings by the number of years they're expected to be retired. There's always those general rules of thumb that people try to follow, and we're going to kind of dive into that, why that's maybe not the case for everybody. All right. So we'll set the stage here. So David is 65. Okay. He's 65 and he plans to retire in about 6 months. Linda is 63 and she works part-time. They believe that they're going to need about $8,000 per month before taxes. And David will reach he'll receive a $1,600 monthly pension, which is it's all right, right? If they both claim Social Security relatively soon, they expect approximately, $3,200 per month combined. So at first glance, what is their income picture kind of telling us right now?
They have a gap.
Do they?
Yeah.
How
Right.
so? Yeah.
So
Right.
didn't you say 8,000 a month?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 8,000. So do the quick math. 3,200 and 1,800 does not equal 8,000.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So
and then we're not factoring taxes too.
First thing
right?
that jumps out is, and the question I would ask is that $8,000 net, right? Is that what we want to take home? Okay, so then I think we also forget, out of your Social Security at some juncture, there's Medicare premiums.
Yeah.
Okay, so on top of Medicare premiums, your Social Security is not your true Social Security, because those got to come out. Number two is, how are you funding the difference between what Medicare pays and what Medicare doesn't pay, which is the other 20%. So now I've got to factor that in. So when we ask that question, is it 8,000 net, and is that counting all those things in? Or are we short? So to me right now, immediately, that would sound like they have a gap.
A gap, yes. Mm-hmm. And so, we'll just...
And we say income gap.
Gap, right. Income gap. That's the key thing to note there, because, if David and Linda were coming into our office for the first time, right, this would be what we call our eye it, right? Yeah. We're taking in, we're eyeing up the current financial situation and evaluating, Correct. Where are we at right now? What's Correct. Missing? And so what we've already identified now, what you would have identified in the first 30 seconds of the meeting, is we got a problem already.
Yeah, for sure. Because when we say, and how many times everybody's heard us say it in my book, everything that we talk about, we always ask, what's your number, right? So, okay, they gave us the number, but I think the bigger question is, was that the correct number?
Yeah, right. Right. You got to do some extra probing, right?
Correct,
because a lot of people, at least, because, I've sat in these meetings too, right? They got a roundabout ballpark idea, but then what do I always follow up with? Okay, can you show me? What's the budget?
Right. Exactly. What's your cost of living?
Oh, well, she kind of does it. Yep. Right.
Money to live, money to have a life. And the other thing that would jump immediately leaping out of there is you made a point. You said assuming they take Social Security. So I guess the bigger question is, should they? Should they take it right away? Is that prudent? Yeah. Because then my next question would be, is that pension a survivorship pension? Is it not a right? How much of that pension is Linda going to receive if something happens to David, right? So that's another thing to point out, because one of the most often overlooked parts of financial planning, everyone, and you sort of alluded this to a second, and I'll touch on it, is we don't think survivorship, okay? Because what we're doing, and here's what you said, is you take your balance, you divide it by the certain number of years of retirement, and you think you have enough money, right? So many things that are factored in there, and I'm sure we'll get into that question. But then I would say, what's the survivorship plan here? And most people look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, okay, when I'm drawing my illustrations on the board and I'm talking about lifestyle in the buckets, and the first thing when we say lifestyle is we want to know your retirement number, and we want to make sure that do we hit that number, right? We want to make sure we figure out, right? That is going to give us the clarity, the certainty through retirement, right? Is knowing that money is going to continue to come in, void of any other issues that could invade our lifestyle, right? But I think one of those is what happens if one of us passes. And so when someone's trying to do simple math, everyone, that doesn't work, because you have to start thinking of all of the things that can happen. Healthcare. What if one of us passes? So again, coming back into that situation, I'd be digging a lot deeper, as you could tell, into if that number's accurate.
Yeah, well, because I think there's a lot of different things that do go into that people they're not thinking about it until it smacks them in the face most of the time. Like, say, a home repair.
Correct.
Right? Say you got to fix a roof, fix travel.
Am I going to jump ahead here?
No, go ahead. Just take it wherever you want to go.
Maybe I will. Well, here's why we talk about understanding that, okay? Because the principle of the old 60% stock, 40% bonds, right? And if you listen to the old rule of thumb, right, we could take 4% withdrawal rate, right? Bill Bengen created that in, I believe, the late 80s. And that was the rule, right? That was the 4% rule.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want everybody to think about that just for a minute. That's assuming we're taking 4% from the entire portfolio. Okay. Is that your advisor's fees? Okay. What is that entailing? And so the problem I've always had with that is we're super dependent on a return of an entire portfolio, meaning I'm not saying he didn't figure that out as he's going through the rule, right? Because
sure.
today it's probably not even the 4% rule anymore,
For sure.
right?
Right.
And then why are we limiting ourselves to 4%? But then, again, keep talking, this becomes more personal. How big is our gap for everybody, right? So remember, that's always different. But my experience in 32 years, if we're dependent on the entire portfolio to generate the income to cover our gap or whatever we're doing, what in lies the problem? The problem in lies that what happens if there's a health event? What happens if there's, hey, I've got a roof repair, or I've got all these unforeseen circumstances. Now think about this. Where am I getting that money? So if our money isn't speaking to us and telling us exactly how I'm getting my gap and how I'm planning for inflation and I'm planning for the contingencies, but also I'm planning for growth for the future, because again, future's future. And we want to be able to say, what's that entail? Your legacy. So there's so many problems when we think of simplicity. And listen, here's the thing. I'm all about keeping it simple. Okay, because I think we have a tendency to be extremely overcomplicated.
Yeah.
I think the media wants you to believe this is harder than it really is. I think other advisors probably want you to believe that it's harder than it is. But we can keep it simple, but stick to simple concepts. So stop and think, would I want all my money generating an income just for me to survive? And then we come back and say, what happens if now I need to get a car or that roof, or I have unexpected health events, but I haven't planned for that? So where's that money going to come from? What if it's a down year? What if we have a 2022 event where stocks and bonds are actually down the same time together, and at one point down as much as 22%? The bond market was down over 13%. So if you invested in the aggregate bond index, you were down 13%. Okay. Now that's where your income is going to come from. Yeah. Okay, so people need to justify and realize that, this, you can be simple, but you have to think of these things in advance. Okay, so David's coming to us here in 6 months. Don't come to me in 6 months. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
But the bottom line is that, he does have some time to get it in place before he starts his distribution.
Sometime, yes.
Remember, that $1 million, is that $1 million? Am I just making that up? How much was the money? Did we even cover that?
Oh, yeah, we could cover that real quick. It was $1 million. It was somewhere in $1 million was kind of roughly the ballpark.
All right, so it doesn't. So,
yes.
So when we see that, always remember, I always say it has to tell you, right? Your money has to tell you, this is where my income is going to come from. This is how much. This is how. This is how it's going to protect me from a health event. This is how it's going to handle inflation. This is how it's going to prepare me for future growth of the unexpected, the things that I don't know that are going to come 10 or 15 years or 20 years down the line. It has to talk to you. That's why when we tell people it's got to be a financial plan, right? Anybody can invest money. Okay, the problem is that's what we start with all the time. We're worrying about investments and rates of return. And the problem is we don't come back and dictate our life, our purpose, everything that we want first, right? That should be, do I have enough now? Do I have enough to fill? So here's David, 6 months out, still doesn't know whether he can do it or not. So am I telling David he can or can't retire at some point, right? So again, that question becomes uncomfortable. The quicker that we get the plan in place, the better.
Yeah. Understood. And so just for our, so our listeners can put themselves in David's shoes, which, yes. I mean, this might be hard when I say these values. It was, there was about 930 that he had.
Okay. So I have to do this math quickly.
No, I mean, you don't have to do, but I just wanted people to know that he has multiple things. He has a 401k, right? He's got a Roth IRA that he's been squirreling about 142. And then of course we talked about that pension that he would be looking at. It would be somewhere around 60.
So he's got $1 million.
It's all, yeah, he's a million.
But 930 of it is in a tax deferred 401k.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. And so I'll build a little bit on what we kind of just talked about, because we talked about
basics.
Yes.
Basics first.
Basics first and foremost, and we'll go as basic as, right? Like, even though they have $1 million saved, because you kind of alluded to this, right? We can't immediately just say, hey, just take $3,200 out of that Roth or that 401k, right? We got to worry about where this stuff is coming from, how we're actually situated.
So here's
right?
my next point to
Go
this.
ahead.
And I hear this a lot. So 3,200, is that what we said the gap was?
Yes.
Roughly?
Yep.
Okay. So the gap is roughly 3,200. And there's your 930 and your 120?
Yes.
Okay. So
140, 120. It doesn't matter.
So I told you he's making me
Get
do
the
this
point.
quickly. So when you think about this in theory, and you're looking at 930, and I'll say, okay, where's the $3,200 a month? Or how are you getting the 32? And here's what, honestly, guys, this is from experience. I hear this a lot sitting in the meetings. I just told you I have a $930,000. No. But how? Where are you getting the money? I'm getting the money out of my IRA or my 401k and my Roth. And I say, no. Where?
Yeah.
And then, of course, when you do that, then they pause, right?
Yeah.
And, of course, I'm being a little condescending, but I'm doing it on purpose, right? Because I need to make them aware. Exactly what are we selling in order to generate the $3,200 a month? So remember this. Number one, we've got to go back is, are we taking it all out of the pre-tax 401k first? Is that coupling with, am I turning my Social Security on? Or am I going to say, hey, I need $8,000 a month. Now I might not turn my Social Security on. I might do some tax planning because I might be able to push some things into Roth, or I'm worrying about my health care because my wife is only 63 years old and she's not going to be Medicare age. So maybe I want to keep my income low enough. Maybe I do take out of the Roth first, right? So remember, those are all really basic things. So I'm always saying, well, how, where, how is it coming? And because think of it this, most 401ks, and I'll just tell you this, and let's just assume, because this is what I hear as well, somebody's going to say, well, Fidelity's doing a heck of a job. Vanguard's doing a heck of a job. Principal's doing a heck of a job. And I'm like, no, Fidelity, Vanguard, and Principal aren't doing a heck of a job. It just happens to be the investments meaning your 401k is just your conduit. The investments inside the 401k, you could pretty much get anywhere, right? So whatever's been picked and how you're evaluating whether or not that's doing good doesn't have anything to do with whether it's Fidelity or Vanguard or wherever your 401k is. Remember, it's the investments that you choose. So then that becomes a whole nother question whether it makes sense to leave them there, because I have somebody say it's doing so well, why would I move it out of my 401k? That's another episode, okay? But here's what I'll say. Okay, so you call Fidelity or Vanguard or Principal or whoever, and you say, I need $3,200 a month.
Yeah.
Okay? Are they going to give you the $3,200 a month? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Will,
Guess why?
Sure.
You own it.
Exactly, yeah.
They are going to say, okay, are they going to come back and go, should you take $3,200?
No.
That's an awful lot out of your portfolio. Okay. Here's the next thing. Where is it coming out of? Are they selling your stocks and your bonds? Where?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What are they liquidating?
Where it comes out, where that money is being liquidated matters. So come back and think about this. If the market's up and I'm liquidating my shares, okay, so maybe I'm taking profits and that's okay. But when the market's down and I'm liquidating out of stocks, is that what we want to do?
No.
How come?
They're down.
Remember, once we sell the shares, there's zero chance for recovery.
Yeah.
You have officially
you actualize the loss. Yes, you realize.
So not
it.
only keep yes. this in mind, this same person is pulling money out that they need to live on. Remember, that's what we're talking. And we're calling and we're saying, here's $3,200 a month. And okay, pro rata version withdrawals coming possibly out of stocks, right? Because maybe we're not giving specific instructions.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden I have officially realized the loss. So as the market recovers, those shares are gone. My balance is never going to recover the same way. So not only am I withdrawing down, I'm also pulling shares out to limit recovery. I've officially locked that loss in. And I think people don't realize that. So when we come back in these examples and when we say keeping it simple, it is simple. You can. Like when we think in theory, do I want to be able to control the way I withdraw my money? And the answer should be yes. You can control what you can. So he said, well, you never know when the market's down. You never know when the market's up. Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to be diversified of where your money is as much as you're diversified, right? So when the market's down, I want to take out of an account that's not going down in value.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
When the market's going up, okay, makes logical sense to withdraw profits and take if that's what I want. But that way I can do what? I can control those distributions, right? So remember that. Understanding for this to be able to talk to you and tell you, and the more that your money speaks to you and gives you these answers, the more confident you are in retirement. The problem is, this is not how we approach it, because keep in mind, accumulation and distribution are different. If you're talking about distribution, it is a completely different ballgame. And come back to our opening remarks. So you want to talk about psychological? It's extremely, so now imagine psychological as you're listening to this and then have no idea what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, and I'm going to pivot, understand what advisor you're hiring. So I'm not picking on Fidelity or Vanguard and Print. That's okay, but they're 401ks. So if I have other investment advisors and they're managing my investments and that's all I hired them for, they're probably not giving you Social Security advice, probably not giving you tax advice, probably not giving you healthcare advice. Okay, so remember this. What are they doing? They're managing your investments. That's what you hire them for. So understand that. Don't get mad at them. Just know who you're hiring. So do you want to hire somebody that manages your investments, or you want to hire somebody that manages your life? And that's a big difference. So understanding that they are there and they've probably done a fantastic job of making you money. That's great. The difference is understanding now once I've got there and now this has got to be here for the rest of my life creates a whole different ball game of distributing and balancing that, income, the non-risk portions along with having growth. And I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, for sure. And and this goes kind of hand in hand with what I was just about to kind of talk to you about, because you kind of just mentioned something about that, because you said a non-risk portion, of your money, right? So, and we've kind of been dangling the carrot, like talking about where you're pulling this, And so I think we've already maybe established, at least if you're a listener, right, that you're like, okay, maybe pulling that money out of the market might not be the best way for me to cover that gap, right? And so one of those reasons it could be, right? But they might be hearing what you have to say and thinking, all right, this sounds like a headache, because there's also factors that you got to factor in too, that, you didn't, or we kind of mentioned, and it was the risk portion, right? It was why are we adding risk onto, our paycheck, our income? Because when you're employed, what aren't you having to deal with?
Yeah, you're
getting that paycheck. If China invades Taiwan, that paycheck's coming.
Correct.
We make another move in the Middle East, that paycheck's coming.
Correct.
Right? So, how do you, I guess, kind of handle that discussion too? If say David turns around and he's like, hey, this seems like a headache. I don't know. I'm kind of nervous pulling money out if it's up, if it's down. How do you handle that?
So when we stop to think of how someone wants their gap covered, okay? So, do you want guarantees?
Yeah.
Or do you want maybes? Do you want to be confident that if China invades Taiwan, that you're going to be able to continue to live your life the way that you want it? So in other words, we talked about $8,000 a month. We'll just stay with that for now. I'm not so sure that's the right number for them, but let's just say it is. And I'll say, so $3,200 a month, guys. Do you want to know it's there? Yeah. Do you want it? So think of it this way. And if I asked David, this would be one of the first questions I would probably ask David. All right. So remember, we come back. How do you feel? And I'll give you two questions that are important here. How do you feel about your Social Security benefit?
Yeah.
Do you love it? Are you glad you have it? Are you? Is David okay? Do you think David would say, I don't care if I don't have Social Security?
I'm thinking David might be looking at how much he saved up and be thinking, I don't know, I could probably delay it. Maybe.
Okay, but let's just say don't delay it. Let's just say if he never, ever
never
had
even
Social
used
Security.
it. Yeah,
No.
okay, I got you.
So but let's just say, David, what if Social Security was gone? How would you feel?
Yeah.
Would you be nervous? Yeah.
Yeah.
I guarantee David's saying yes. Yeah. Number two is, do you think your pension, you like your pension? Are you glad you have your pension? Because it's a gift. Yeah. You're thankful. Is it enough? David, it's not. Okay, the reason it's not enough is because you have $3,200 you got to come up with every month that you have no idea where it's coming from. Okay, so you love the pension. You're glad you have Social Security. So is that enough for you to live comfortably and feel confident? I can tell you right now, David's probably going, I don't know.
Probably not.
And I'd say, David, it's not.
Yeah.
You wanted $8,000 a month. Yeah, Chris, but I saved $1 million. Yep, but you don't know what you're doing, and you're a little bit nervous about the market risk, and you're nervous about. Now, remember, we might need. I'm pretty confident we're not going to need all $1 million to solve that 3,200. So, wouldn't it be great if you were able to put some money in the market and not have to be required to live on it? Wouldn't it be great to have something created for you that tells you exactly each month how much money is coming out of there for the rest of your life? And not only that, what happens if something happened to you that money would be able to take care of your spouse in the event of an untimely death? And most importantly, if China does invade Taiwan, right? Or we have a black swan event, but guess what, David? That $3,200 a month is going to keep coming. Okay, that's what we say. Would you rather create the certainty of the pension-like income, or do you want to go ahead and play with the risk of the markets?
Right.
Okay, that's how I handle the question. Now, here's my point. Am I going to force David into taking the 3,200 safest place? No, but I'm going to say, David, tell me how all of this is going to be handled. So remember, each person has a different appetite for risk. Can I create a portfolio that doesn't have to include guaranteed income? 100%. If that's who you are, that's okay. But let's come back and make sure we know who you are first, okay? Because I know a lot of people that would rather have the certainty of knowing everything's going to be answered. And I'm just going to tell you this. My most successful retirees are the ones that are not worried about anything, okay? Some of the ones that have taken the other path, we're helping them and we're doing a job, but are they the first ones that are making phone calls and they're not going on a trip and they didn't want to build the garage, and you know why they didn't? Because they don't know what's going to happen. So you have to choose who you are in order to do that. But my philosophy is why?
Yeah.
You've climbed to the top of the mountain. You've made it here.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you risking it?
Why risk it? Yeah. I mean, I've probably said it in a podcast before. I've probably said it on that the most dangerous part of climbing a mountain, people always assume it's elevating yourself up to the top. It's actually the descent.
That's right.
That is the most dangerous.
Correct.
Part. So why would you want to be leading any of that descent with any times of any kind of uncertainty at all?
That's right. I mean, and to my point, and I'll come back to this. If I needed all his money to hit $3,200 a month, in Houston, we have a problem, right?
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Okay. Because there's, just like you alluded to, there's nothing to be the what if game.
Yeah. So, and now maybe you don't want to touch on this too, but when we talk about, pensionizing or taking risk off income, what do you really mean by that? How do you accomplish that?
So basically what we're doing is we're taking a portion of your money and we're buying into a guaranteed source of income. And a lot of times we like annuities in that particular frame. So when people say annuities, everybody cringes. Okay, what's the problem there? What annuity are we talking about?
Exactly.
Here we're looking at big, strong, safe companies that are basically giving you a guaranteed income stream. So basically, we are shifting the risk to the annuity company. We're shifting the risk to the insurer, saying that, hey, you've got to pay me for the rest of life. So we're taking a portion of our money, we're pensionizing it, we're creating joint lifetime income if you're single or married, and we would create single lifetime income if you're okay. Now remember, there's no risk to that. And then here's the question I get. Sometimes I get pushback is, well, what would be left? I don't know. You don't want anything left. What do you mean? You don't want anything left. That means that you have spent and maximized the amount of money that you can withdraw out of that account. And if that account goes to zero, guess what? That insurance company has to continue to pay you. That's the risk that they're taking. Okay. That's the risk you are trading off. You're trading off certainty. And in this case, in today's world, Christopher, much higher withdrawal rates than a 4% rule. I can tell you that right now. So we want to maximize that amount to make sure that you're hitting your monthly goal. So when we come back to this, keep in mind success. What's that definition? We have to retire and start to pivot away of net worths. We want to pivot away to security, safety, certainties, right? We want to pivot away to monthly incomes because when we stop and come back and say a paycheck is absent from our life, something we're very comfortable with, okay?
Yeah.
We want to turn that into that way of thinking, because if you think about how did you save for your vacations? How did you pay for your cars? How are you paying for healthcare? It's the money that's coming in. So the reality of this is you have to, again, want to pivot your mind to understanding that you are creating an income source. And that is why that's so important. That's how I would handle that question, is if, why we would look at maybe an annuity in that case is for somebody that wants to take away anything bad that can happen and wants the certainty. So when we talk pensionize, and I think people need to understand this. When we say pensions, everyone, and we say annuities, and we use them in the same language because that's who underwrites pensions. I don't think people understand that. Okay, General Motors is Prudential. Okay, numerous Talcott. These companies are selling their pensions to annuity companies, basically letting annuity companies take them over. Do you know why? Because that's what insurance companies do. They actuarially handle and know how to handle pensions.
Yeah.
All we're doing is self-creating the same thing that other companies are striving to push to go do. Lack of pensions in today's world. So for David and Linda, we're saying, is $1,800 enough? The next question was, is that $1,800 100% survivor to Linda? Is it half? Is it 75%? Is it nothing? So we have problems in that situation that we want to use the annuity in this case to solve. And that's my point, is that you have to realize that pensions and annuities are in the same language. The reason people bash annuities is they're misunderstood, they're probably oversold, but we have to look at the fact that they do solve problems for the right people, and it's the right type of annuity, and keep that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's always like the biggest thing I like to think about it whenever we're meeting with clients is like, this is a tool in the toolbox.
That's it.
That's it. That's all it is. We're not using that tool. It's not, there's no one size fits all way of solving everybody's problem. That's what I think we've always said is everybody's situation calls for something different.
I mean, there's people that don't want to use it. That's okay. You don't want to create safety in there. I'm not going to.
But I just think it's a shame that word's kind of become a, it's like the
stigma.
A word. It's like you can't say it out loud or people are like, So can you maybe talk a little bit about where that stigma does kind of come from, why people have such a misunderstanding towards them?
Pretty simple. The type of annuity. So a lot of times people said, hey, I got, but that this was sold to my mom, or this was sold to my dad. And you what was the word I just used in there?
Sold. The S word. Yeah.
You're not, okay. You're selling.
Yeah.
You're selling a product. That's the problem. Okay. So annuities get the word because people sell them. That's the problem. Okay. It shouldn't be sold. It should be there to fit, okay, and solve the income problem and only the income problem. Okay, so the stigma is there because that's what, they've heard how many times that da-da-da-da. And then, you're trapped in them for 10 years, 7 years. You're buying this, you're going to live off this for the rest of your life. What's 10 years? That doesn't mean you can't wait to start taking the money out. It just means after 10 years, the insurance company has made their money back.
Yeah.
The commission that's went to the advisors made back, right? And so now, okay, they're like, do whatever you want after 10 years. But the truth of the matter is right, everybody, if it's positioned properly, benefits from it. But that's why that you should love a surrender charge. You know why? It gives you the guarantee that the insurance company says that we're going to give you. You should never be scared of a surrender charge because if you've done this right, you have enough liquidity elsewhere. That annuity is in place to solve the problem. And that means it was an income survivorship problem.
Yeah.
Okay. The other stigma was what type of annuity. So sometimes if they're variable annuities, they're loaded with fees. There's market risk on there that they didn't know. And this was such a bad situation. So usually it's because of a past experience. Okay. So that stigma has carried with them. Here's the irony. How much research has everybody started to do why they've all of a sudden been being recommended? Why? Wade Faw, if you guys look him up, recommends annuities. He says the actual best success of a portfolio for success in retirement is using an annuity and stock market. What do we do? Surprise. Been doing that for 30 plus years. Okay. How come? Because it works. All right. But you start to see it. Why is the government advocating to put 401k or put annuities inside 401ks?
Yeah.
Are they onto something?
They might
How
be.
about because there's no pensions? Okay. So understand making sure you're talking to the right advisor, right? And we're putting in position to make sure that the problem is being solved because it's necessary. It's not trying to put, a square peg in a round hole. And that's what happens, right? You want to make sure it's there to solve the problem. And so that word has carried bad stigma. I don't care. I'm not embarrassed to say I use it. We disclose it. We disclose compensation. We disclose conflict of interest, right? And the bottom line is because the client chose that solution.
Yeah. We worked with them.
Correct.
We worked with them. We talked through it together.
Correct.
We arrived at a decision together because that's what we do. Correct. I mean, we work
Remember
with the
this.
client.
We don't sell an annuity.
No. It's all piece to the greater whole is how I always think about it. And so, that's probably one of my favorite things that we do in our IATs is like, you're never going to hear us talking about what we just talked about in that appointment. Never. Like David and Linda, like we wouldn't even be focusing on this by this point.
Wouldn't have
in
even, the conversation would never come up.
No, it would have never. And so that's what I love is we're not going to actually dive into the specifics of how we're going to do anything until we can.
Because I don't know.
We know.
So remember this. What do you want? What are we trying to do? What do you know what you own? Tell me why you have it. What's it supposed to do? And what you're doing the whole time in the IAT is trying to find the problem, right? What's the problem? What's making, what is going to make them more confident? What's going to make them nervous? And remember this, with all the experience we have, they're coming to see us. Yeah. We have to make them aware of things they're not thinking about.
For sure. Yeah. And de-risking their income like that is guaranteed a phrase that they've never thought about most of the time.
If you say this pretty simple, why would you not want to create more pension? Yeah. Now, and the next question is, Social Security is an annuity, by the way. Okay, nobody realizes that. All annuity means is promise to pay. I think
yes, it's a phrase.
It's a term. No, it's an IRS term, by the way.
Right.
And I think we have to come back and remind each other's, how much then did you put into the Social Security system? Can you cash it out? And everybody's say no. Well, why are you worried about? You put money in there. Right? Did you put money in your pension? What's your pension value? What's your lump sum value? And until they give it to you, you have no idea, right?
Yeah.
You just want the income.
Yeah.
So remember, all we're trying to do is create income, but keep control over that income. And if you do the right annuity, you're still controlling it. Okay. Now, again, does that mean David and Linda should own one? We don't know yet.
No, right. We don't know that. Now, we could start inferring just as advisors in that meeting, like, I think for me, one of the things that I would have flagged instantly was, okay, Linda's working part-time.
Right.
Linda's very dependent on David.
Right.
Right off the bat. So like you mentioned earlier, there is a major survivorship issue there.
Right.
We've already talked about, having risk on your income and whether or not so why wouldn't we be trying to fix that income so that
So when we talk about first
Less
buckets,
thinking.
and we're not really, because people could hear it, but the first bucket is to again sustain lifestyle, and part of lifestyle means we want to make sure that we're removing anything bad that can happen to that income to make sure that you are hitting that next chapter and running, right? And simply think about this. One of those problems would be, how are you solving the survivorship problem? And here's what most people say is, well, I got $1 million. She'd be okay, or he'd be okay. And I'm like, okay. And then how's your money invested? What happens if we have a 2008 scenario? So now somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So how much money would your portfolio lose if we had another event like that? Right? And then what starts the question now? Well, I don't know that. So then you don't understand the risk in your portfolio. So you assume $1 million is going to continue to generate the 3,200. The bottom line is, how's it being combated for inflation? What happens if the market drops? So tell me, what happens to your portfolio then? How confident are you going to feel? How confident is she going to feel? And I guarantee you, Linda, you're probably not feeling so comfortable right now if the pension goes away, because we don't know whether he's selecting survivorship or what the difference is. You're going to lose one of your Social Securities. Now tell me, if that's not managed properly and that market drops because nothing's been ever changed in your portfolio since you've been doing it, How confident do you feel now? Okay.
Yeah.
It's all about confidence.
All about confidence, right? Okay, so we've talked about, some basics on their situation, and we don't know, every single thing right now. But I guess just at a glance, just to kind of help our viewers kind of visualize the process of how we'd be going about this, how would you start, taking their pension, Social Security, their Roth, their 401k, their savings? How would you begin to start working through, maybe organizing those resources with them?
So again, what has to happen is we've got to look at the long term. Okay, so we want to start with their purpose, right? What's their lifestyle? What's their goals? How do those start to relate? Now, think about this. We haven't once talked about the risk in their portfolio.
Right.
Okay. So how do we handle that? When does the Roth have to come into play? Are we looking at trying to do some tax planning? Are we willing to do that, to forego? Do we understand when taking our Social Security? So basically, keep in mind, what we're doing now is building an income plan based on what we know. So we already know they have a gap. So the bigger question is emotionally trying to figure out what it is that we're trying to solve and the best way to go about doing that. So that's looking at an entire withdrawal strategy, but that's also going, okay, let's look at the survivorship plan, right? So I'm building through that. And then I'm looking at, most importantly too, how is their money invested, right? What's it going to take? What's the risk level? How comfortable is David and Linda with the risk? What did I find out about how they feel about what they know? So once we start doing that and we start building an income plan, we also want to put them in a risk reward scenario, right? So we want to get them into something where we're going to start teaching them about what they own so that they can understand, are those investments aligned with them first? Because remember, part of the problem is people don't know they have a problem. Right? They don't. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're okay. Maybe that's aligning with them. But I've found most people don't even understand how their investments are tailored to them. So first and foremost, again, we want to come back and educate them on risk reward because we need to make them understand whether or not they have a problem, right? Most people don't understand how to benchmark. Most people don't even understand what that term means. But once we can start to craft where their problem is, right, we can start letting them understand where their problem is. Okay. And once they understand it, then it's their decisions, right? It's their decisions about how we should align it and making sure that we're aligning what we can do with what it is that they want, right? So I would be looking at all of that as I'm building the plan.
Yeah. Understood. Now, let's say, we've clarified their spending, their organized accounts, and, maybe in this scenario, we're like, hey, it makes sense to pensionize some more of this income. Since we already have a pension, maybe, we start that discussion. We start getting into the annuity discussion. Maybe, right? We're going to just say maybe, because obviously we're going to be talking with them through this whole thing, and they're going to have the good, the bad, the ugly, and then kind of let them make their choice, right? And it's very intentional, the whole process.
Well, it's about what they want.
Exactly. How does... let's say we do go that route, or maybe they don't go that route, right? How does the actual paycheck system kind of work? Like, how do we start determining withdrawals with them, distribution, or, coordinating what kind of product to get them?
Yeah. So again, this is going to come back if we're looking at this is coming back based on their income plan, based off what they want, right? So the questions are then, how does Social Security fit in there, right? So the question is when and how are we going to take Social Security? If we're looking at pensionizing the income, we're going to start doing the, how long can I defer? Is it an immediate draw, right? What's the payout rates? So we're looking at, if they're looking at pensionizing a portion of their income, we want to figure out how much of that is going to take to cover the gap, right? And is that going to be enough that's comfortable for them? And so as we go through there, that we're going to do that analysis first, right? And then again, listen, I'm going to be truthful. If it takes us to use all that money, okay, what are we probably telling David and Linda? Probably not retiring.
Probably not retiring right now.
And here's why, right? And so, again, that's going to have to go into that thought process because, are they worried about taxes? Are they worried about their survivorship plan? How long is Linda going to work? So as we continue to sort of build more about what they want out of it, I think that's going to, again, determine where we put the money.
Yeah. So just to kind of, I guess, summarize this whole thing, right? They'd come into our office. We would be clarifying their goals, right? We'd be building out a picture for them, how their picture currently looks income-wise, right?
What's it called?
That's our plan.
Clearview.
The Clearview retirement plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? We'd evaluate their major decisions, right? Long-term, medium-term, short-term,
Absolutely.
right? We're assigning every asset to a purpose in the plan, right? It's all going to be intentional, right? And then that's when we start worrying about the paycheck, how it's going to be hitting you.
So describe
Risk,
what you mean
not
by
risk.
intentional purpose.
Intentional. Just adding, right?
So how are we handling,
Yeah.
right? Survivor plan,
Survivor.
income gap. How are we handling contingencies, inflations, health cares, future growth? So every bit of money has a decision, meaning there is a goal tied to every single thing we're doing. And the reason we're doing that is, again, we come back to simplicity. You should understand the moving parts of how your allocation is working towards your financial plan, because each piece of that money has a separate goal for it.
Yep. 100%.
Be intentional.
Yep. So again, it's not, the value is not merely selecting investments that produce income, right? There's more to this than just numbers. There's more to this. It's
Well, you made a point earlier. You said something about dividing by the number of years, and how many times I hear people do that math, and then we start to say, assuming there's no market drop, well, I could put it in, a CD earning 3-4%. Well, what if it earns 1%?
Yeah.
Right. So we're trying to take the simple math in this, and the reality of it is that's not planning. That's just because you're wanting to be adversarial, thinking you can divide it by 12. I've had a lot of times, I've had people with pensions saying I chose the single option because I divided it by the number of years based on the income I was taking to get into their pocket. Guess the flaw in that means they didn't count for survivorship. So when we come back to the same concept of somebody thinking they're dividing this by some number, then it matters where an investment, because if you said, I put in a CD or a bank account, well, I wouldn't lose anything, okay? You lose purchasing power if inflation's 7% again, okay? There's that number's not a finite number, right? It's you have to realize that things change. That's how it changes. And then it would matter how you invest. How am I reinvesting it? If I'm earning 1%, where am I going to put it? What if it's 0.02? Where am I putting it? Okay, now what? Now I got reinvestment risk. I have, that's why everything has to have a plan and a target. Because then we're not worrying about those types of things because it's already been factored in.
Exactly. So David and Linda's situation, it's hypothetical, but their dilemma, it's extremely common. We see it all the time. And I think one of the big things that why I thought this was such a good example is because one, they've, I think a lot of people would hear them having like $1 million something and be like, what's the big deal? Why are they so worried about retirement being 6 months away? And I think that's the important thing to note is like $1 million isn't the $1 million of your, but that's not what it's about.
Correct.
Right. It's not about dollar amounts. It's about, the intention. It's about the goals, the purpose, and working with what you got.
Your lifestyle dictates your retirement.
100%. They spent decades accumulating money, and yet no one showed them, right, how those savings would eventually, right, have to convert.
Correct.
That's where.
Yeah. The first question for David and Linda, right? Why are you here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. What's going on? Right. So obviously they're sitting there, right? And we know that. So it's up to us to help educate them through the process. And it's why they're there, right? That's the whole idea of why someone came in, and keep reminding everybody of that, right? So we understand that. That's why there's no one shoe, one size, what is it?
One size fits all.
Yeah, whatever that is. I knew it was something like that. But I mean, you stop and think there's so many things that goes into this, and David and Linda are a perfect example of there's so much going in their life that they're unaware of, right? And so, when we start digging in, I mean, we could really get into that and start kind of walking them through the things that they have to think about. And I think we've sort of talked about that, right? So
absolutely. All right. So, that's going to do it for this episode of our Clearview Finance podcast. That is by Immediate Financial Services. Thank you guys so much for listening. And, if you're trying to keep up with us, catch new episodes, you can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So make sure you stay in the loop, and we will see you guys next time on the Clearview Finance podcast. Thank you. you.